everyone. Welcome to the Flameless Fireside. We're excited to have you with us tonight. I'm Celeste. I'll be your host tonight, and I'm here with Joyce and Everett and also Katie, and they'll be our co-hosts as well tonight. And then we have Curtis Morley back, and we're super excited to have him back. He is a best-selling author, and he's written a book called Counterfeit Emotions, and we'll be discussing aspects of that book tonight. Tonight's topic is power versus control and the difference between the two. One is counterfeit, one is authentic on your emotions. And Curtis is going to help us understand the difference between the two and how to embrace a more authentic side of ourselves versus falling for the counterfeit, which we are surely convinced on this podcast that is Satan trying to put us into a downward spiral. So we are super excited to have you back, Curtis. Thanks for coming.
I am so glad to be back. It's so fun to see you all again. And I'm excited for the topic that we picked. With Counterfeit Emotions, we've got 30 different dyads or pairings. And tonight's topic is a really fun one, a little bit controversial. So that's going to be fun. We're gonna talk about that. But really, the discussion tonight about power versus control is what we're going to do is we're going to reframe the discussion. We're going to reframe how we think about power versus control. And I'm so excited to get into it.
Great. Thank you. Do you want to give us a quick rundown of yourself really quickly? And then also, I know you might want to start with the four
criteria.
Yes, the four criteria when it comes to understanding the difference between authentic and counterfeit, just for those who may not have seen the first episode.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So like you said, Celeste, I'm a Wall Street Journal bestselling author, and my first book was a book on entrepreneurship. It's called The Entrepreneur's Paradox. I've got a copy right here. So this is my first book on how to go from basement to buyout, and how to overcome the 16 pitfalls of startup life. And the biggest thing is getting out of the paradox. But I've really shifted my focus. Even though I am a business coach and mentor and help people turn their companies into rapid growth companies, I've really shifted my focus to a topic that is so critical, especially in today's world, which is counterfeit emotions. And I had to make it past 40 before ever realizing any of these principles. And I'm thinking to myself, as I'm going through my hardest trials in my life, like, how is it that no one taught me these principles my whole life? Not at church, not at school, not at home. Like, how is it that no one taught me the difference between an authentic emotion and a counterfeit, or an emotion that looks and acts and feels like the original emotion, but puts on the mask, puts on the clothing of that emotion, and creates destructive patterns of disconnection in our lives. And that's what the counterfeit is. A counterfeit is an emotion that masquerades as another emotion, yet it really creates these disconnecting patterns that are destructive in our lives.
So I would assume that authentic would connect you with others, and then the counterfeit would disconnect and separate you.
Yeah. And for those that saw last week's episode, the four criteria, you'll recognize these from last week. For those that haven't, there's four criteria that really help us identify, is the emotion authentic or is the emotion counterfeit? And the authentic emotions, those are the ones that there's four criteria: connection, direction, motivation, and valuation. And they all end in shun, so it's easy to remember. The first is connection. Does this emotion connect me to myself? Does it connect me to others? Does it connect me to God? And does it connect me to the truth? The second is direction, is where does this emotion take me? Does it take me to a place I want to go? And there's three directions that authentic emotions take us. They take us forward, they take us upward, and they bring us together. Those are the directions. The counterfeit emotions, they only take us in one direction. And that direction is back to the emotion. It's back to that counterfeit. And the reason why is that counterfeit emotions can't survive without more of itself.
It's like it feeds on itself.
It does. It's this
Cyclical.
beast. It's this
Yep.
this parasite that has to have more of itself to continue to breed and get bigger and bigger. And without it coming back to itself, it can't survive. It
Well,
dies.
it's, I guess in my thought, I'm thinking, or in my mind, I'm thinking, it's kind of like lies, right? If someone's lying, they add more lies to it to protect the lie that they've initially lied about. But all it takes is the truth to like abolish all of that. Like just it's gone, demolished, it's just destroyed. But to
Yeah.
hide the lie, you have to keep lying. And I feel like that's kind of like that loop that these counterfeits have you in. It's just this constant negative cycle that just needs the truth or the authentic emotion to come in and shatter it.
And I think some of these you do need to compare it with the authentic emotion, because when we discussed nice versus kind in another podcast, that one blew me away because I'm like, wait, I'm a nice person. It's important to me to be nice.
That's always the big
And
one.
I never in my life would have considered that as a counterfeit emotion. And until you compared it to kind and how kind is different than that, it kind of blew me away. Like, oh, well, okay, so yeah, I'd rather be kind than nice, and some of your other, saving versus serving, the power and control. Like there's so many things that until you compare it to that authentic and the difference between them, you would never think that one has a negative connotation to it at all. Or maybe not negative, but like the counterfeit,
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and I think, Katie, I think that's a great point, because I do think the what we're talking about tonight in power, there are a lot of connotations out there about what power is. And there's some people who would always think power is not good, like some definitions, and so I think you're right that like when we're talking about and really defining what that is, comparing it to what is the counterfeit, like that helps us to better understand that emotion itself. So
yeah, and one thing you said, Katie, is so important is that they're sneaky. These emotions are sneaky. They make us think like, wait, I'm in the authentic emotion. Nope, I'm in the counterfeit. And getting because they're so close in the feeling behind it, that they look and act and they masquerade as this emotion. That's why it's easy to see opposite emotions. Like here's the authentic and then the opposite, love versus hate. It's easy to see the opposite emotions. The sneaky ones are these counterfeits that slide right up next to the original emotion. And that's why they're so dangerous, is because they're so dang sneaky.
That's right. And hello, Satan. He's the great father
of all lies.
Yeah. So he knows how to pretend to be what he's not, and he convinces many people that he's right and he's not. So I think it's interesting. I do think that there is almost like a rule, an eternal rule, maybe, that just states, sometimes something that's completely wrong will want to butt up right next to something that's completely right, so that it can kind of hide and take on the appearance of, but try not to be figured out, right? And that's the best way to do it, is right up next to what they want to pretend to be. So
some of the most deceptive lies or anything that you believe is like 98% truth. And then you've got this little piece that makes it an untruth. And I think that's probably what some of these things are, is there's a lot of good to them, but then there's this little piece that will make it not be
not so good.
The true one. Yeah.
Yeah. And going back to nice versus kind, we just did our first master class. It's a 21-day course around nice versus kind. So it's 21 days to transform out of nice and into kind. And that what you said was so perfect, because as we started going through this, people are like, light bulb, like, holy cow, I've been doing this my whole life. I've been the nice guy, the doormat, the placater, and I am. The reason that I know this is, and I can say this, is because, hi, my name's Curtis, and I'm a recovering nice guy. Because it is so sneaky, because my whole life, Bambi's best friend, he's like, if you can't say nothing nice, don't say nothing at all. It's not true. What that says is if you can't say anything quote unquote nice, then just shut up. Don't share your opinion. Don't have an opinion. Be the placater. Don't rock the boat. That is so unhealthy. And so getting into all the principles, like in Counterfeit Emotions, every dyad or every pairing has a model behind it. And so we walk through the model of how to get out of being the boundaryless, the person that can't have the hard conversation, all those things, how to get out of that to truly kind, where you, number one, are kind to yourself. And then in a very boundaried and healthy way, you can be kind to others. And so it went so well. We're actually doing another one on October 9th. So we're going to do another version of Nice versus Kind, that masterclass. And it's transformational. It's so fun.
That's good, because that one is, like we've mentioned, I mean, it gets a little controversial. People kind of struggle with that because they don't know the definitions. They don't understand the differences. And so I agree with Katie, like once that's clarified and once they know what is on both sides of nice and kind, they're like, oh, totally get it. So good luck with that. I hope people sign up to come and experience your class.
I've been able to apply that with my teenagers. Are you being nice right now, or are you being kind? And they're like, oh yeah. So it was like even like very significant for them too, in how they interact with their friends.
Yep.
I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, I'm so glad.
Different from mothers, like my mom and everybody, like I think in her generation, oh, just be nice. That was always their phrase, be nice.
Yeah.
Anyway,
be nice.
A whole transformation of the word nice. And so
bless her heart.
Oh, bless your heart. That's right.
So nice. Yeah.
Such a spirit. All right. Anyway. Okay, Curtis. So let's get into power. Verse is, why am I going a blank? Control. There we go. Sorry. Okay. Do you want to let us know, like, definition wise? Because I know I've got like a quote I want to share and ask your opinion. I know Joyce has kind of got some definitions, but why don't you start us off wherever you want to, on whichever side of that, pairing, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. If I can start with actually an activity that I'd like everybody to participate in. Ooh. So without thinking, just say, and you can, for everyone listening live, you can put in the comments, but without thinking,
okay,
who is the greatest leader that you can think of? Name one or two. Go.
Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ. Keep going.
Gordon
B. Hinckley. Go.
Ronald Reagan.
Martin Luther King Jr.
Martin Luther King Jr. Keep going. Who are the greatest leaders?
Paul. The Apostle.
Yes.
Paul the Apostle. Yes.
Joseph Smith. Have we said him yet?
Joseph Smith. Moses.
Moses is one of my favorite. I love. Oh, Mike Webb said Ronald Reagan. Yeah, I love Moses.
Would I be totally like blowing things up if I said Trump, just to kind of mess things? Like,
I think we derailed really fast.
That would totally be a different conversation. Okay, now let's do a very different exercise. Oh, Mike threw in Moroni as well. Nice. Let's do a different exercise. Who are the worst dictators you can think of?
Oh.
See, now you could bring up
Korea guy.
Now we can get in trouble
North Korea.
A whole bunch today, but
Well, right.
Is it Kim Young Jun or something like that? I don't know his name, but
like Hitler.
Hitler, Stalin,
Stalin, Mussolini,
Lenin,
Saddam Hussein,
my old boss.
Joyce's old boss. I'm really glad you said that, actually, Joyce. We're going to get into that. Castro, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference? Like, what's the difference between those that are great leaders and those that are great dictators?
Love, I think.
Yeah.
Love?
Respect.
Maybe like an arrogance, maybe? Like one thinks they know everything. I don't know. Maybe the good leaders know a lot too. I don't know. What do you think?
I think the fake leaders or the dictators usually try and tell the people that they're going to free them, but they enslave them. And the good leaders give the people freedom and let them do what they want, choose for themselves.
Yeah.
New agency.
Let's think about that first list. That first list, you said, Jesus Christ. Did Jesus Christ have any formal positions? Did he have any title that was given to him by his boss, or no? What about Martin Luther King? Was Martin Luther King in government? Was he, you know, why was he a great leader? He didn't have any formal authority.
He
None.
had a cause that he believed wholeheartedly in.
Yeah.
maybe?
Even, he was a reverend, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Mhm.
Even there, he didn't have official authority. He had followers.
And he had passion.
He had passion, and he had power. You look at Mahatma Gandhi, powerful leader, powerful. Mahatma Gandhi changed an entire nation. Population-wise, one of the biggest nations in the world. He changed the whole nation. But he didn't control.
Hmm.
And if we look at the 4 criteria, so let's dive into the definition and then dive into the 4 criteria. The definition of power, there's some really important pieces of power that's different than control. Power comes from within. Control is all outward. Control is outward, power is inward. And so the crazy thing about control is we try to control out instead of drawing power from within. And you think about, okay, Joyce, let's go back to your former boss. Let's go back to your former boss, the dictator. The dictator. Would you say, I'm just guessing, would you say that your former manager was a control freak or a micromanager or
a big time? Yeah.
Yeah. So do you see the difference between true power and control? And if we go, let's go into the criteria. So the first one is connection. How does power connect us? And let's actually take a little side note before we get to the connection. What is power? What is power?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I went and looked that up in the dictionary today, and there are 23 definitions of what power is. It's a lot of things, I mean, there's obviously different definitions that have to do with energy and that have to do with mathematics and so on. But even just among things like, there's a couple of him here, like a great or marked ability to do or act, strength, might, or force. So that was one of the definitions. Another is a person or thing that possesses or exercises authority or influence. There's another, which is a verb to inspire, spur, sustain. So there's a lot of definitions. So like that was one of the things that Celeste and I talked about was we probably really need to understand how are we defining power? How are you defining power? Because I do think sometimes it is seen as a negative. Sometimes, power corrupts and power this and that. So yeah, I think agreeing on here's what we mean when we're talking about power, I think is really important for the discussion.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. And one definition of power that I love to use, because going back to the idea that power comes from within, and there's 2 sources of power. One is from within, one is from above. Control is all about force outward. Power is from within and from above. Control is outward. I have to control you. I have to control everything. One of my favorite definitions of power is actually the physics definition of power. If you go to the physics definition of power equals work over time. Power equals work over time. That's the definition of power. And one common synonym for power is strength. And you think about control. What is the definition of control? Well, it actually, if you look up the etymology of the word, it comes from the 15th century word, hold on, I gotta make sure I'm saying it wrong. The Latin definition is actually the same as the word contrary.
Contrario. Oh, that's Spanish.
Control and contrary come from the same Latin root. So what are you saying is that I'm going to be contrary to you. And if we let's think about some common phrases that come with both terms, like power. What are some common phrases that come with power? Like if you think of the word power, how about higher
Power
power?
hungry. Right.
Okay.
Well, and it seems to have this like push-pull often,
Yeah.
like some conflict in power or exerting control to have power.
Maybe power symbolizes strength or vice versa.
Yeah. I'll throw some out there. Higher power, personal power, knowledge is power. You hear this a lot. I'll do everything in my power.
Mm-hmm.
The power of love, right?
Love that song.
It is a good one.
Back to the 80s.
It is a good one. And control. Oh, Troy added Power Rangers. Thank you, Troy.
Ooh, nice one.
But power is what is given to us. And if I can illustrate the opposite side. So when we think of control is an illusion. Control is an absolute illusion. We think about all the things that we need to control or that we try and control. And what are those things? We can't control the past. The past is a memory. We can't control the future. The future is a dream. We can't control the weather. We can't control hair growth or hair loss, maybe a little bit here. We can't control other people's reactions. We can't control our actions. And, you think about some phrases with control, like one that, when I talk about this, one that comes up a lot is self-control.
Mm.
And it's interesting because I like a different phrase that is actually, I think, more accurate, is self-discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about self-control, do we really have self-control? How many of you have gotten sick in the last year? Like, why didn't you just control that? Why didn't you control that? Why did you have to get sick? Just control it, right?
Even someone who lives so healthy their whole life, always exercising, eating their vegetables, everything, and then they get cancer. Like they do everything to maintain health,
right?
And then there's something, and that's hugely like it really destroys people trying to process like I did everything right,
Yeah. Control is such an illusion. Control is an illusion because when it comes down to it, nothing is ours. There's only 4 things that are ours. And you think, well, no, I've got this bookshelf and look, I've got an NBA basketball signed by John Stockton and Carl Malone. That's
cool.
Mine. Yeah, I've got a car and a house and a job and I've got a bank account that's mine. I've got this wealth. I've got family around me. I've got my family. They're mine. When it comes down to it, there's only 4 things that are ours. Everything else is outside our control. And because it's outside of our control, everything else is a gift. Everything. And I found this out the hard way. When I went through my divorce, everything was taken from me. Everything. My bank account was cleared out. My kids were taken from me. My house. Everything was taken. My mom had cancer at the time. I had 2 massive herniated discs where it, ended up in the ER. So I didn't have my health. My money was taken. My kids were literally taken. My house, I didn't have my great big house anymore. I I was crumbling as a person, and I wasn't performing in my job, and so I lost my job and I lost my title, and you know all of these things that I thought were mine. I thought the president of the company was mine. I thought that my car was mine and my money was mine and my house was mine. And all of a sudden it was all gone. It was all gone. And that's when I realized there's only four. There's only 4 things that are ours. And those 4 things are our relationship with God, our relationship with Christ, the ability to choose, that's where power really comes, and we'll talk a lot more about that. And our soul. Our souls are ours. Our ability to choose was given to us by God. He gave us that agency. And then our relationship with Christ and God. Everything else is an illusion that it's ours, that we have control over it. Everything else. There's nothing that's ours except for those 4 things.
And I think that even just that phrase you just said kind of swings back around to the gospel topic, that the Lord is like, nothing is yours. Like, all of this is mine, right? I've given you your agency. But everything else you have, I can take away in a heartbeat. And I think that's what you're saying. Like, it might appear or feel like it's ours, my home, my money, my car, whatever, my job. But in all actuality, through other people's agency or through the Lord having the power he does, he could literally take all that away. So it's really, really not ours. You're right on that for sure.
Yeah, and we don't have control over any of it.
There's a good quote by Elder Maxwell, and I'm going to totally kind of spoof it here or just get it wrong. But essentially, he says the only thing we really have to offer the Lord is our free agency, because he owns everything anyways. None of it's coming with us. Even if you still had your fancy house, your title, your business, a Maserati, whatever you wanted, all those things are material and only last for a finite amount of time. But our free agency and our choice, that's the only thing the Lord's given us that he won't take away. So we have that ability to give that to him, but he won't take it from us. Everything else, he owns it.
Yeah. And that's what's so beautiful, is that everything else is God's, which means everything is a gift.
Yep.
Everything. My body is a gift. My relationships are a gift. My having a warm bed to sleep in at night is a gift. Everything is a gift. And when you start to see the world and how beautiful the gifts are that we get to breathe every day, every minute we get breath, that we get to live, that we get to time and time again be redeemed so that we can make choices. And power, it has 2 sources. God gave us agency. And if we want to tap into our personal power, that's where power lies. Power lies in the ability to choose. Power lies in agency. Power lies in our ability to choose either God's way or Satan's way. And if you think about the whole plan, it's based on these 2 principles, power and control.
Yep.
God said, I'm going to give you this power called agency, and I will never take that away from you. And that's the real power we have. Martin Luther King Jr., he tapped into his power, and he had 1 million people march on Washington because of that power. Jesus Christ, because of the power to choose, chose to redeem us and to save us from our sins.
Well, and I have a thought about that very topic. And even the Savior, when we think about the plan in the beginning, and Satan said, let's force everyone to do stuff, and then I'll take the glory.
We're going to control.
Right. I will have the control, and we'll control that. But the Savior said, not, the glory shouldn't be his, it should be the Father's glory. So ultimately, he didn't, like, anything that he did really wasn't about his position, because that glory was going to the Father. He was still following in the Father's footsteps. He didn't get a position because he got the title. He got that position because of what he did, because of the relationships, because of the connection. Anyway, I'm not sure I'm articulating that well, but I think that it really puts things into perspective when you think about that, the coercion and the force that Satan wanted for us, and he's still trying to force on us, versus the power that Christ had, not just because of his title, but because of his actions and his choices.
Yeah, I feel like it's his intent, right? His intent was to give us the agency that the Father wanted for us. And I think the intent is kind of what, Chris is saying, is that that's an inward thing. And I'm going to try to teach you, and I will do all this for you to try and save you, but it's up to you, right? And then obviously Satan's intent was control. I'm going to control all of you out there and, gain that power or that prestige for doing so.
Yeah.
Curtis, give me that list of 4 things again so I can put it in the chat.
The 4 things are my relationship with God, my relationship with my Savior, my ability to choose, which is really where power comes in, and my soul, my eternal soul. Those are the only 4 things that are mine. And I love that quote, Everett. You need to keep sending me these quotes. Every week you just like pop in this awesome golden nugget. But yeah,
I didn't get it quite exact, but I got the gist of it. So I can find it and send it to you.
Yeah, that's exactly it, is that nothing is ours except for those 4 things. And because those 4 things are ours, that's where we find power. That's true power, is found in choice. And I was looking, I usually keep it right here, but I remembered I did a seminar on Friday and took it with me. And so it's not right here, but Viktor Frankl is another one of those great leaders. He wrote the book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he said so articulately that the last freedom that we have is the ability to choose our response to any situation. And so that's where power comes. You think about power as far as the definition of physics. Power equals work over time, work divided by time, right? That is the physics definition. I choose to step into my power. And what is power? Power is actually the choice to work over time, the choice to do, the choice to act, the choice. And there's a couple phrases that are some of the most powerful phrases we can say as humans. One is I choose. That is a powerful statement. And the other is I am.
Yep. Affirmation.
In reference to God.
Yep.
And those are powerful, powerful statements. And so if we can go back to the criteria, if we can go back to, the first criteria is connection. How does tapping into my power connect me? Well, it's very obvious that I'm tapping into me. I'm tapping into my soul, right? So there's the me part of connection. And it's tapping into God, because God gave us agency. He will never take it. Satan wants the exact opposite. He wants to control us. Then others. When I choose, then I'm choosing, number one, to hopefully be in a centered, grounded place, but then I connect with others. And finally, the truth is when we tap into our power, that's truth. Gandhi had no power, or excuse me, Gandhi had no control. He had no title. He had none of that. He was a burgeoning lawyer that just had gotten his start in India, where law was by itself kind of a new phenomenon, and he tapped into his power, he can connect with others and the truth, and that's what power is. Control. Think about control and how disconnecting it was. Are you still really good friends with that boss of yours, Joyce?
Oh, stop. You guys have lunch all
No.
the time.
Other bosses, not that one.
Control is so disconnecting. It is like an instant disconnection. Just chop it off. Okay, you want to control me? I'm out. It's so, there's such a visceral response to control. It's so disconnecting. So that's our first criteria is connection. Does it connect? Power connects, because power taps in here, and it can tap in to, you tap into your power, I tap into my power. We connect around that. We connect around the gospel. We connect around a belief like Martin Luther King Jr. did. We connect around these things. Oh, it's so connecting when we tap into our power. The second one is direction. Where does the emotion take me? With power, it takes me to action. I choose. I love that phrase. It's so powerful. I choose to act. I choose my destiny. I choose my next step. I choose my goal. I choose my mission. I choose. So powerful. The direction is forward and upward. And in so many instances, it's together. You look at Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc is one of my heroes. I absolutely love Joan of Arc. And she said, this I know now. Let me make sure I get the phrase, the quote right. This I know now. Every man. Oh, I'm totally going to slaughter. I'll just give you the brief, the brief version. But every man chooses. Every woman chooses. And sometimes that choice is to do nothing or very little. Yet they choose that nothing or very little, and which is one of the greatest tragedies. The direction of power, of choice, is to say, I'm going to move a nation. I'm going to change a nation. Joan of Arc changed a nation. Mahatma Gandhi changed a nation. Christ changed all of eternity because of the choice he made. He
go ahead,
chose. So, sorry, go ahead, Celeste.
No, I was just sitting here thinking that this kind of connects to like even our emotional side. So if we say I choose to do something or I choose not to do something, it took me back to where when I was teaching my kids, when people ask you to drink alcohol, you don't say I can't drink alcohol, because the truth is you can, right?
Yeah.
I can't smoke cigarettes. Yes, you can. You can choose to do that. But when you when you say I choose not to drink alcohol, it's like it's an outlook, it's an emotional movement, even though and it's an actual action as well, but you don't play victim, right? You're not being negatively affected, like, oh, I can't drink that, my church says I can't, or whatever. It's like you take the power in the moment, say I choose not to. I choose not to do that. And it's an emotional strengthening statement, and I love it. So,
and people that hear that are going to respect that choice more. Because if you're like, oh, I can't, they'll push you.
They'll challenge it. Yeah. They'll challenge it.
Yeah. But if you choose, I think people will, oh, it commands kind of a power.
It's an internal thing out. Yeah. Versus something acting upon you from the outside. And so I think that it goes right along with what you're saying, is that, the power is from within. And so when you choose to say, I choose, or I choose not to, that is sharing that power. And I think a lot, as we just talk about these massive leaders that were just amazing and changed so many aspects of our lives, like that's what they did. They led by example. They shared what was inside them and encouraged other people to do so. I choose not to drink alcohol. Maybe you should choose not to as well, right? Whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it just shows that the power was coming, like you said, from within them. And they weren't saying, here, let me take everything from you. You shouldn't be doing that. It was more of, I'm going to lead by example. And it's an intent and almost seated inside of me. And it means so much to me that when I speak, you can almost feel how powerful this is, because it's a true belief, right? It's
Yeah.
a solid belief there.
Well, and I think that people are still sometimes going to challenge that. So it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
like you're going to say that and they're going to be like, oh, okay, I get it. That's why they may still challenge it. But if this is something that you are, it's more meaningful, and it's not like they're just trying to change one decision, and so it just sort of becomes it becomes sort of useless for them to be challenging that. And but yeah, I mean, I feel like you're still going to have challengers, but when it is who you are, rather than just something that you say, I can't or whatever. I think that's a more powerful approach, that I think people will feel, it will be more difficult for them to sort of justify that, try to talk you out of that. So
Yeah, it is, because if you say I can't, it's like, well, can you? Yeah, I think you
But you
can.
can.
Let's try.
Yep.
Versus I choose, and you feel that when you say, oh, I choose not to drink. Then they're like, oh, and just like, I don't remember if it was Katie or Celeste said, then you are actually inviting them into that choice.
Yeah.
And you're inviting them into curiosity and say, oh, really? Tell me more. And so it really exudes this power. It's almost like this shield of saying, I choose. It's amazing, because they feel your power. That's such a powerful statement. And going to the flip side of control, so connection, then direction, power, it takes us places, it moves us, it gets us to act. It's work. Power is work. Control is the opposite. It spins on itself. You think about someone that has control. You think about the dictators. They have to get more control and more control and more control and more, and it just builds and builds, that if they don't increasingly exert control over the people that they have responsibility for, what happens? Coup after coup, after revolt, after civil disrest, they explode, right? Because you cannot continue to build that. You think, there are very, very few dictators that haven't been overthrown. Very few.
Well, and in that course of dictatorship, they take away other people's agency to force control. They kill them, or they torture them, or so they have to remove other people's agency to control, and that is evil.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And you think of it as a parent. You try and control your kids. The more control you exert, especially as they get into their teenage years, the more you have to exert, and you keep adding all this control on. And what happens? Complete rebellion.
Right.
And then you have zero control.
And then they are like, I'm out of here and I'm doing everything you told me not to.
Yeah. And it goes back to the fact that control is an illusion.
Yeah.
Control is an illusion. We only have 4 things. That's it. We don't have control of anything else.
The thing that's interesting about control, a lot of the times, because people out there might be thinking, I don't want to control everyone's lives and whatever, but maybe they tend to be labeled as a controlling personality, whatever. I do know that many years I struggle with control, and mine was based in fear of the outcome, fear of someone else's choices and where it would lead them. And it was all like fear-based, which is ironic because that is a counterfeit emotion to faith, right? And so it's just interesting that that Satan, I truly do believe he's like the master of these counterfeits. And he wants us in fear, which then leads to control, which then leads to wherever that leads, right? And so I guess as we recognize, why we may control, why do we feel like we want to go beyond our own little area where we have control and control others, and recognize the importance, first of all, we shouldn't be doing that. And honestly, we have no control, even with the other people. We can try to force them, but as we've stated, it does not turn out well. So it's best just to realize, hey, I'm going to control what I can, which is me and my choices and my agency. I can pray for that individual. I can encourage that other individual. I can be a good example to other individual, but I cannot get into their life and try to control it, because it just is not the plan, first of all. And it's a lack of faith when you choose to do that.
Celeste, I like what you brought up before we actually started the recording.
Oh, okay.
Because it actually is very true that when you try to control things that are outside of your control, that's when anxiety comes in, because you're having anxiety about all these things that you want to control and that you have no control over. Whenever I start, I think, leaning that direction of trying to control things, I always think of the serenity prayer. It's to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. Yep. And if you can kind of step back and say, okay, can I control this? Should I control this? And maybe, Curtis, you can help us with a different vocabulary even on that, instead of using can I control this or should I control this, what language do we use so that we can kind of get some peace in stepping back and just letting go. I'm letting go of this because it shouldn't be in my control, or I shouldn't try to control it.
Yeah. Right. And just so that everyone knows, this is actually what I shared earlier before we went live. And it says things that matter and things you can control, and then what you should focus on. So there are a lot of things that matter, and there are a lot of things that maybe you can't control, but you just look for the overlap, and it's a smaller portion compared to everything else. But that just shows you how much control we really have. We really just don't have a lot of control other than our agency and connection with God. And as Chris was saying, or Curtis was saying. So, I think it's an easily understood concept, but instituting it can kind of be a little bit more challenging.
Yeah. Well, and I think I can't help but think, as this is a single adult podcast, and in relationships, it's one of the areas where we sometimes struggle, is that desire to control, to control the outcome in a relationship. Someone I'm dating and I want them to do these things, or, and so I think it is, it's a really good topic for us to cover, because as Celeste said, there's just no point in that. And yet we sometimes we white knuckle it and we want to control it because we want the outcome to be what we want it to be. And sort of getting to the point where we can just say, I choose to I choose to accept this, or I choose to walk away from this, or, I choose to allow that person to have their own agency. Those are really powerful things, but we try often to control them instead. So
yeah, it's so funny you said that. And if you'll indulge me in a personal story, relating to dating and relating to control, the week before New Year's, I got on my knees, and after turning off all of my dating apps, and I said, okay, God, I'm going to stop pretending I have any control over this. I'm going to stop pretending, because I don't. And if I'm going to focus on my daughter, I'm going to focus on helping people and bringing this message of counterfeit emotions to the world. If you want somebody in my life, then I'm going to need some help here. So you make it happen. And otherwise, I'm going to make choices to love and to help and to serve. And that's about it. And so let me know if there's anybody that you have in mind for me. That was the week before the New Year's dance, where my good friend, Brett Bunker, invited me to the New Year's dance. I told him no. I'm like, nope, I'm not going. He convinced me to go. I actually got to the parking lot and left again. And he called me a block and a half away. He's like, hey, are you here? And I'm like, oh, yes, I'm here. And I turned back around, and then I was at the dance. So I spent some time there. An old flame showed up with someone else, and I was like, oh, too soon, I'm out. And so I left again, And as I was leaving the building, it's called the Studio Draper, or the old school, I pushed open the door, and I heard the words "stop, go back inside." And so I went back inside, went up the stairs to the dance hall, and found Brett again. And he goes, "Hey, I've got to introduce you to someone. She's amazing. Her name's Patty." And that is my fiance.
I know, it's so exciting. But I want to point out that you, in that storyline, there was a lot of choices you personally made. You did not need to turn around and go back inside. You did not need to attempt to go and return again. You could have walked away. So yes, just as much as the Lord was opening up that door for you and saying, please, Curtis, stay. I've got a great person there. You still chose that. And I love that, because it shows your agency is what made that come about, right? You didn't have to follow that prompting. And you did. And now you're engaged and soon to be married. What? My goodness.
September 25th.
Yeah. I'm like, it's super, super close now. So that's awesome.
She is the woman of my dreams. Like I literally dreamed about having someone as amazing as her in my life. And she is, and it's incredible. But it was so cool because I just surrendered to that. And if you hear her story as well, she did the same thing. She just surrendered and said, I'm going to stop trying to control this. I'm going to try. And we both were in that place of, I'm going to let God jump in and let him guide, rather than saying, I'm going to force you to love me. I'm going, rather than, Mike, no dancing, huh? But going back to what you said, Celeste, is you nailed the third criteria. The third criteria, connection, direction, motivation. What's your motivation? And it's interesting because the motivation for all of the authentic emotions are love and surrender. Surrender is the opposite of control. Control is the counterfeit of power. Interesting how that dynamic works. So the authentic emotions, if you look at the motivation, it's done in love and surrender. If you look at counterfeit emotions, there's two things: fear and control. That is the motivation behind the other counterfeit emotions. So it's actually a meta emotion. It's an emotion that flows through other emotions. And it's that control aspect is the motivation behind these counterfeit emotions. And if you look at where is control born? Where does it come from? How do I break out of that control? It's what Katie was saying. It's based in fear. Control is based in fear. I'm so scared that I don't have control. I'm going to exert control. I'm going to grab on as tight as I can. And if you look at the wording in the Tree of Life and Lehi's dream, it's really interesting because it talks about those that held to the rod and those that clung to the rod.
Yep.
And the ones that held to the rod, they made it to the tree. The ones that clung to the rod, they just like iron.
They were scared. They had fear.
They're the ones that ended up across the street, across the river in the big, great and spacious building.
Yep.
Because they wanted to control it. They were so scared of letting go. They clung to it with that control rather than surrendering to life, surrendering to God. And surrender is so beautiful because it's a meta emotion. It's one that flows through others. But there's a book that talks about the 10 greatest leaders of all time, the 10 greatest influencers, those that influenced the world more than any others. And Christ is, of course, in the list. And the author says that one of the things that Christ did that no one else did is he taught people how to love their enemies. He taught people how to love. Prior to Christ, it was an eye for an eye.
Yep.
You get hit, you hit back. You don't love your enemy. Christ created this transcendence. And in that same way, if we tap into our power and surrender everything else to God, we transcend to a higher level. We transcend to a place that doesn't involve control, where we can let go and say, you know what? Life happens. And I'm so grateful because I only have 4 things that are mine. Everything, this breath that I'm taking, this podcast interview, the good friends I have that I'm looking at right now, all of this is a gift. This is a gift to me. Everything else is a gift. We only have those 4.
Curtis, I have a thought. It's reminding me so much of this book that I read when I had toddlers, because I had 3 under 3. The oldest was deaf, so it was really like 3 under 2. But I read Parenting with Love and Logic, and I still use it today with my teenagers. I use it with adults. I use it with my patients. I used it when I worked in the mental health unit, and it worked amazing there. But it is this. It's giving up control. It's giving choices to people. So putting it in like a real basic sense, it's freezing outside, and you tell your child, you can take your coat or you can leave your coat. But if you leave it, you're going to be so cold outside. But you have to surrender to their choice, and you have to be willing to not fix the natural consequence. And you have to be willing to let them suffer those natural consequences with empathy. And so if they, instead of like wrestling with the kids, take your coat, put on your coat. No. You surrender to their choice, because before you give a choice to anybody, you have to surrender. Just like you're saying, you have to surrender control. When you're influencing people, and this is like at any level, any age, you're giving choices that you're okay with in your circle of influence, but you surrender control and you let natural consequences happen. And so like if my child says, no, I don't want my coat, I'm like, okay, that's your choice. You don't have to take it. But then when they're freezing outside and their teeth are chattering, I can't give them my coat. I have to let them feel what those natural consequences are. But I tell them I'm sad. I'm sad you're cold. I wish you had your coat, So we can still, I think that is a lot of what is when we're interacting with other people, because we can't control other people. And I think that's where, especially where this is a relationship podcast, right? It's where we get into trouble, because we're trying to control how other people act, what other people do, how other people act towards us. What, like, I hate it that he does this, or I need him to do that. And when we surrender that control and we put choices in front of them, but then when natural consequences are there, we respond with empathy or compassion or sadness, even
kindness. Yes.
Then that's where we have power, not over people, but power over our peace and how we feel about what's happening around us.
With you just saying that about the relationships, it kind of dawned on me. I feel like control in a relationship kind of change you. It kind of makes you captive, because you're trying to just grab on and create something that maybe is not there, and you're just so like connected to it, you just can't get away because you're just trying to fix it, right? Whereas if you're in a relationship and you're saying, I have a choice here, I can invest, I can leave, I can, the choice is mine just as much as the choice is there. There's freedom there, right? And then it's like, okay, well, I'll choose to hang out a while longer, or I'll choose to just get out now, or, like there's just a sense of like, I can breathe because I know I have a choice. Whereas if you're controlling and trying to control the other person and trying to make them be or do whatever it is you want them to do, you're so like caught up in that. It's almost like you're putting chains on yourself in a way.
And resentment.
Yeah.
And resentment. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting, because I think when we feel the need to control in that way, it's a lack of faith. I don't know whether it's a lack of faith in ourselves. It's a lack of faith in our Heavenly Father and His plan for us. But when we want to control things like that, it's because we want the outcome to be what we want the outcome to be, and we're not able to say, what needs to happen will happen, and that I deserve more than someone who isn't doing the things that I feel like I need to control him to do. So yeah, I think that's an interesting. I don't know, Curtis, how that all interplays with the various counterfeit emotions and authentic emotions. But I really do think it's when we are so controlling, it's kind of showing a chink in that relationship with our Heavenly Father, because we don't really have faith.
It's so true. Celeste, you just keep going item after item. You hit number 4 perfect.
Oh, did I? Oh,
Yes.
I planned that. So
Yeah, you're just rocking it. It's number 4 is valuation. What does power value me at? Power means that I have a gift from God called agency. That's my power. And it also means you have that same gift from God, that you are a child of God, that you are someone that is bestowed by God with one of the greatest gifts we could ever get, and that's agency. You think about control. What does control do? Control is so devaluing. Control says, you're less than I am, and I'm going to control you, and I'm going to force you to do things.
And I don't trust you to do it right or to do it like I want to.
Or I'm afraid you're going to take over, and so I'm going to suppress you before you do. I mean, but it's all negative. It's all self-centered, I believe. I think a lot of fear, again, is just mixed in with all that.
Yeah. And Joyce, let's think about your boss. How valued did you feel?
Oh, yeah. Not very valued.
If everybody knows Joyce, which we all do, she's amazing. So obviously
She's amazing.
They were losing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is because then what happens is that they clearly don't value you, but it then makes you question your own value, which is the kind of scary part of all that. Clearly she didn't value me enough, but then it sort of makes me question, well, what is my value? Yeah. So that kind of control, it's damaging to the relationship, but it's, then it's also damaging to the person you're controlling.
Yeah. It says you're either stupid, incompetent, have no clue what you're doing, all of these devaluing, debasing things that are said with control without even saying a word. They're so devaluing. But power says, I respect you and your agency. Just like Katie was saying, you get to choose. You get to choose whether to be warm or whether to be cold. You choose. To be warm means you put on a coat. To be cold means have fun. We'll see you in 2 minutes. and it says, I value you enough to realize you're going to make a good decision. I'm not going to try and control you. I'm not going to try and force you to do anything, because that's what control is. Control is forcing the natural order of things into your own perspective of your own model for the way things would be. And if you look at scripture, when you talk about power, it's interesting because the number one thing power is associated with is God and the Holy Ghost. And it's amazing how many references talk about the power of the Spirit, the power of the Holy Ghost. That's where power really is.
And what is their power? Like the power of the priesthood. That's what we use on the earth. So
yeah. And God gave us agency. There was a discussion. It was hey, what are we doing? Is it agency or is it not? God chose agency. He said, yep, that's what we're doing.
That was the plan from the beginning.
And we have a gift from God. We have this amazing gift inside of us called agency. And that's where power starts. That's where power really is we can tap into our power, but we can also tap into the power of God. And that's where the two forms of power really lie. Everything else is an illusion and control.
Well, I'm thinking about kind of this concept in terms of as we're in leadership roles. And I think about, I don't like to be a micromanager. I really don't. And so I have a tendency to, if people want to do something different than I would do, I'm fine with that. Go ahead and do that. As long as we have the right outcome, go ahead and do that. And so I feel like I'm thinking to myself, I'm giving them agency in a position where I legitimately have the ability to control what they do if I'm the boss. But it's a powerful thing to watch how people grow when they're given that agency. Even just things like, how do you want to approach this compensation analysis? You figure that out. You do it how you want to do it. I don't need to tell you every step along the way, but it's a powerful thing how people grow when they have that kind of agency.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really powerful. It's really powerful.
All right. Well, Curtis, we are at the end of our time. We're a little bit over, but it's always good to have you here, and we always enjoy the discussions. And I like how it's just there's depth to it. And I love that. I love being able to dig deep into a topic and tying it into the gospel. And we just appreciate your time. And we're super excited for part 3, which is next week. For those of you who are watching that want to join the after party, I just put the link into the chat. So we will join you in Zoom in a few minutes. But for now, we're going to sign off. And thank you again, Curtis, for being here. We really appreciate it. And everybody, have a good night. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.